Starfield does not support the use of joysticks, which for a game that lets you play in space and fly around in a spaceship seems like a, well, strange omission. However, using a third-party tool and a mod, you can fly around Starfield using a joystick and a keyboard pretty easily. Now this might make you wonder if you can also get the throttle stick working as well, and technically you can, but there are a couple of major issues with that. I will talk about that later in the video. But for now I want to show you how to get up and running with a joystick and a keyboard so you can start setting it up for yourself. The main tool that we're going to need is called X360CE, which stands for Xbox 360 Controller Emulator. I will leave a link down below. You can find the download links on the front page. I'm going to download for all games right here. I've downloaded to my desktop, but wherever you've downloaded yours to, you'll need to find it, and it will be a zip file. Don't worry if you can't see .zip at the end. That just means your Explorer does not have that option selected right now. I'm going to right click and then I'm going to select Extract All. If you have a preferred program for handling archives, you can use that instead, but this will do the job. Extract All, click Extract, and it will unpack a folder called X360CE. Once it's unpacked, you can actually delete the zip file. You're going to be running this executable. It automatically opened up the folder for me. You can actually move this folder wherever you want. You could leave it on your desktop, or as I do, you could also send to. What I did there was I right clicked on the file, I went to send to, and then you can click desktop and that will create a shortcut for you. What this program does is it allows you to emulate an Xbox controller using your joystick. You will need this program running when the game is running. However, if you want to set it so it's always on, I'm going to run it by double clicking. You can go along to Options and start with Windows. I generally don't do that, but if you don't do that, you will need to make sure you run this emulator each time you play Starfield. Don't worry if you forget and you get into spaceflight and realize your joystick isn't working. You can pause the game, Alt-Tab, run this emulator, and you will have no problems. At this point, I would highly recommend you go along to the Devices tab and make sure the joystick that you wish to use is in the list and is selected. I'm using a Thrustmaster T16000M. I also have a CH Pro throttle, but I won't be using that for Starfield. You then want to go along to Games, and you will want to click plus Add, and then find the game in question. So for me, it's Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Starfield. And I'm looking for starfield.exe. Double click there, and it will add this game to the X360 controller emulator. Now click on Controller 1, and this should all be pretty blank. I'm going to go to the drop-down menu for Game here, and I'm going to select Starfield. So this emulation will only work for Starfield. You then need to add the device you're going to be using by clicking where it says Add and the giant green plus sign. Select your joystick. Again, in my case, it's the T16000. Add selected device, and I'll get that little beep telling me something's connected. Just going to make sure starfield.exe is selected. And now I'm going to start by mapping the flight stick itself to the right thumbstick. And I'm going to do that by clicking on the up arrow until it flashes in red, and then I'm going to move the joystick forwards and also backwards. I'm then going to click on the right arrow or the left arrow. It doesn't actually matter. And I'm going to go right and then left. And as you can see now, the thumbstick is moving in response to my joystick. I also want to set up some buttons and triggers. I'm going to start with the right trigger, and I'm going to use that as my main trigger. I'm going to click on the left trigger, and I'm going to use the top thumb weapon button on my joystick, pressing that. And I'm going to do the same for the bumpers because I've got 2 more thumb buttons on the top of my joystick. That is now all of the buttons on the top mapped. I also have a thumbstick on top of my joystick, and I'm going to use that to distribute the power. So I will need to emulate the D-pad. I'm going to click on the up arrow, and I'm going to move the thumbstick up. Click on right, move the thumbstick to the right, and so on. Pretty self-explanatory at this point. And now if I move the thumbstick around, as you can see, it lights up. And you can do this for any of the other buttons. So A, B, X, and Y. Or for example, you could, if you clicked on the center here, you could emulate pressing the thumbstick down by assigning that to any of the buttons on your joystick. You will probably notice I haven't touched the left-hand thumbstick. We will talk about that in a little while. And the last thing to do is just make sure this is enabled with the green tick. If not, select it and then hit Save All. And now you can start the game and see if it works. And in game, joystick is now controlling my movement. Fire buttons, scanner, thrust, and power distribution is all working. So that's a good start. Now you may have noticed that I'm rolling when I move the joystick. Sorry, not rolling, yawing rather than rolling. I have it set. If I go along to the settings, controls, I have roll dominant off. You can select roll dominant on if you like. And indeed, normally when I play this sort of a game, that is how I would fly. I like to have my flight stick axes matching the ship axes. However, there is a small issue with this, and that is when you start using the keyboard, it is also rolling. That was the keyboard. This is because the roll dominance only applies to the controller thumbsticks. So, because I'm essentially using the keyboard for, well, what will be rolling and accelerating and decelerating, I will need to turn roll dominant off. Now, I will discuss this a little more later on because some of you are probably wanting to leave roll on the joystick, left and right, and have the twist grip for yaw. I will explain why it's a little problematic in a while. For now, just go with me. I'm yawing with the left and right. So, I'm now going to show you why we're going to need a mod or two. I'm going to engage the thrusters and I'm going to do downwards thrust and then I'm going to start moving the joystick. You'll notice it's not working because whilst the game lets you hot swap controller and keyboard and mouse, it will not use both at the same time. So it's odd. It's kind of detecting that I'm moving it, but it's not going to let me do anything because I've got the keyboard engaged. So we will need to fix that. The mod we're going to use to fix this issue is called Simultaneous Mouse and Gamepad, and it's pretty self-explanatory what that does. You will require the STARFIELD script extender and the address library for SFSE plugins. Trust me, if you've not already got this installed, you want this anyway. This is just such a useful mod to have. The thing is, of course, if you're on Game Pass or a Microsoft Store bought version of the game, you can't use the script extender, at least at the time of making this video. I do know somebody in the comment section for this mod did suggest they had managed to convert this mod for use with Game Pass, but I don't know what the official stance is from this mod author, so I'm not going to cover that in this video. If something about that changes, I will be releasing a video discussing this anyway. So obviously you will just need to download this mod and those 2 required mods and install them as normal. If you've not installed any mods before, I will leave a link down below to a video where I explain how to do that. It's not that hard, trust me. It's not a big deal, yeah? Don't panic, we've got you. And once in game, I can engage the thrusters, begin to turn with the joystick, and everything is working. I've still got thrusters engaged. Fire buttons are working. Pretty much everything is working as you would expect. One thing you should probably notice is the user interface elements that tell you whether or not you're thrusting seem to be disabled when the joystick is enabled. I don't quite know why that is, but it's not stopping the thrusters from working. You can see it working right now. If I start moving the mouse even slightly, it re-engages the user interface elements, but as soon as I use the joystick, they've stopped. But to be honest with you, I never ever use those anyway. There's a far superior way of knowing whether or not you're pressing a thruster. You can feel you've pressed the key. Anyway, that's pretty much it. That's all you need to do to get joystick and mouse working in Starfield. And honestly, if that's all you came here for, the video is pretty much at an end. All I'm going to do now is discuss why I didn't use the throttle stick. So, if you're still here, I'm going to assume you're curious as to why I'm not using the throttle stick, why I've not decided to go full HOTTAS or HOTTAS, depending on how you want to say that word. And I did get it working, and it worked pretty good actually. I got the pitch working on up and down, I got left and right joystick rolling, and I got the twist grip doing the yaw for me. I even got the throttle working for thrust. Kind of. You see, the problem is throttle sticks are supposed to be absolute input devices. You set the throttle to say 60% and you should go to 60%. Starfield does not work that way. As long as you've got the thumbstick held forwards, the mark will climb until it hits maximum. So if you want to say hit the 50% throttle mark, you keep your finger on the stick or the W key and release it once you reach that point. And you have to do the same with the throttle stick. You have to move the throttle stick forwards, and then once you reach the required throttle, pull it back. That feels really, really weird. I mean, completely bizarre, and honestly kind of defeats the entire purpose of a throttle stick. So right out of the gate it was a bit odd. But it wasn't that made me ditch it and go back to keyboard. It was the thrusters. One major weakness in Starfield is you cannot define keys for the thrusters. There is an override key, which for me is the space key, and it then overrides the WASD keys or the left thumbstick. So that's the thing that sets the throttle or does the rotation for me. It could be the yaw as well. And what this means is to go to thrust up. I'm just going to slow down so I'm not moving. To go up, I would have to press the space button or whichever button was on the throttle stick and then move the throttle stick forwards. Then if I wanted to go down, I'd pull it back. That's kind of weird, to be honest, but it gets even weirder when you realise that to strafe sideways, to thrust sideways, I had to use the twist grip on the flight stick, which is on the other hand. This means half of the throttle controls are on one hand and half are on the other. And that just did my head in. I could not wrap my brain around it. Normally I would have a single thumbstick for the thrusters. I would just use the thumbstick without thinking. With the setup in Starfield, with the throttle stick, not only was I having to concentrate to just do it, I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't fly whilst manipulating the thrusters, or at least I couldn't fly in a straight line. I also found when I couldn't at first yaw and thrust because I had roll dominant on the joystick. So I was basically rolling and thrusting, but I couldn't keep a constant direction. My brain was just totally fritzing out. And this was not even in the middle of combat. And I realised I was never going to get the hang of this. The whole thing was too weird. And so in the end, I decided, you know what? I'm just going to go back to using the keyboard, and I will only control 2 axes with the flight stick. And obviously I had to have yaw be in the left and right, even though that's sort of, you know, uncommon when using a flight stick, because the keyboard is totally and utterly locked to roll. So I had to have roll on that hand. And that's it. I'm pretty sure someone out there can probably get used to it. There's probably someone who's out there right now managed to set a key on their throttle stick or on the joystick that overrides thrusters, and then they just use throttle and twist grip without any problems. And I'd love to hear from those people, because if they've got any advice on how to get that working, I'd love it. I'm also thinking people who use 2 flight sticks might have an advantage here, because it might be a little easier to get that one working, and I'd love to hear from you guys. Did you get that set up, and if so, does it work? Because I'd love to be able to use the throttle. I just honestly can't. However, what I will tell you is keyboard and joystick is still like 10 times better, 100 times better than mouse and keyboard, in my opinion. It's so much easier to fly. I don't have to keep my eye on the bloody crosshair all the time to center up. I've had so much of an easier time since adopting this setup. It took me a few hours to really zone in on what I needed from it, but now that I've got it, I'm really feeling it. But I am curious if anyone else has gone a little further and managed to make it work, specifically with thrusters, because it was the thrusters that did it for me. Okay? Anyway, that is basically it. That's me done rambling. Thank you for listening to me drone on about this, and I hope, even if you've made it this far and for whatever reason, whether it was because your browser button stopped working and you couldn't hit stop, or you were genuinely interested in why I wasn't going HOTTAS. Yes, I say HOTTAS. Thank you for listening to me anyway. I hope the video was helpful, and of course I will be making more videos like this in the future. I'd love it if you could join me for those videos. I look forward to seeing you there, and until then, remember, as always, have fun.
This is where we belong.